The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests of the Side Project Live are not necessarily those of the Illinois Libertarian Party, the National Libertarian Party, Radio Fubar, Tuieville, LRN.FM, the kindly old neighbor on the corner, some random jerk who just cut me off on I-80, the entire Broadway cast of Hair, Bruce Rauner or Pat Quinn, or the Martian Invaders. So there.
We'd like to invite you and all the members of your household
to gather around and join us now
for a very special episode of
Side Project Live. And what's so special about it?
I'm not wearing any pants.
You know who likes special entertainment like that? My mom!
Wait, you guys. And welcome once again, everybody, to another episode of Side Project Live. Once again from the Side Project Tower in beautiful, historic, rural, boring Morris, Illinois. This is Jim Goebel.
And from during winter months, the meat locker in the basement studio of Lockport, Illinois. Hi, it's Eric Ferguson.
Alrighty, I'm going to have to turn your volume up a little bit here.
Well, let me. I can do that. I just picked a spot in the middle and went with it. There we go.
Okay, test. How you sounding?
I sound fine. Hey, baby.
Hi, baby. Come to Santa, butthead. All right. With all that having been said, I'm going to turn my microphone down just a little. I think I might be too hot here.
I got to plug my...
I've never had a woman tell me that.
There you go. I got to plug my mic processor in. I have a really nice one, and I don't use it. I usually handle all of that in software, but with this program, doing it in software has been a real pain in the neck. So maybe I'll do it with hardware instead. You know,
one thing I want to, even though I've not really been in touch with this guy, one thing I do want to suggest to everybody, if you're thinking about doing a podcast, listen to the show, The Audacity to Podcast. I've been listening to that for about a couple of months now, and they got a lot of good tips, information on both what to do and hardware, software, hosting, just every aspect of the whole 9 yards, the whole deal. Yeah. Highly, highly, highly recommended. But
and if you do use the Google Hangouts, there's a guy who, I don't know, he's the guru, and there's a bunch of videos made with Google Hangouts. He's being interviewed, how to use them, how to use their features, all that stuff, and a lot of good information there too. And a lot of that's the same stuff, just podcasting in general, how to use a microphone and a light and various things. It's good stuff.
You're talking about the same guy?
I could be. I don't think so. I don't think that was the name of his, but maybe.
Oh, you don't remember the name?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I don't know. You know what? If you're using the Google Hangouts, you know how to use Google. Go search.
Yeah, like there's a website out there. It's just a direct link to Google, but it's called Let Me Google That For You. And whenever somebody asks a stupid question, you just post a link to that, and yeah, it's awesome. But before we go any further here, first of all, if you want to contact us, we have the Q&A going. Our Google voice number, 815-200-4912. I'm thinking about discontinuing use of that, but I haven't really decided yet one way or the other, mainly because nobody calls it. They don't like us. Our Twitter is at thesideproject2. Our email is thesideproject2@gmail.com, and you can use the hashtag TSPLive. And I kind of tend to forget to use that myself, but there you go. And going to give a quick shout out here to the DuPage Libertarians. The Side Project Live is brought to you by there's a spelling error I never noticed before. Brought to you by the DuPage Libertarians. The DuPage Libertarians meet on the third Thursday of every month at 7 p.m. in Addison, Illinois at the American Tap Pub and Grill, located at 701 West Lake Street in Addison. $5 burgers, craft beer. What more can you ask for? When a problem comes along, the DuPage Libertarians.
So it's still written better than how Jonathan Gruber speaks.
Jonathan Gruber.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, Jonathan Gruber. He is the guy that said, Obamacare voters, are you stupid?
Yeah.
Yes. It took me a second. When you said Gruber, the very first thing I thought of was Die Hard. Because he was a Gruber, and the guy who played it, one of my favorite actors, totally putzing on the name right now, but I do like him. He was also in the Harry Potter films, and he was the voice of Marvin the Paranoid Android in the big screen version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But yes, and
You
I've
mentioned
just
you
been.
wanted to talk about him.
I'm sorry?
You mentioned you wanted to talk about him.
Yes, I did actually. Just wanted to bring this up because I also want to talk about net neutrality.
Yeah.
But oh wow, there's some ruckus going on downstairs with my son. It sounds like that's That's going to be fun. But according to CNN, years old but newly scrutinized videos of MIT economics professor Jonathan Gruber ignited a political firestorm this week because a self-described architect of Obamacare thanks the stupidity of the American voter for leading to passage of the president's signature piece of legislation. With Obamacare open enrollment set to begin over this weekend and the Supreme Court set to weigh in again on the law next year, Wait a minute. This weekend? I thought it was already open enrollment was on there. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. And the Supreme Court set to weigh in again on the law next year. Republicans pounced using the videos as additional ammunition in their case that President Barack Obama and his administration misled the American public on Obamacare. But it's been kind of a different storyline to follow. Read through this story, and I was complaining about my writing of the writing of the DuPage Libertarians ad because I accidentally added an extra the. The CNN article has quite a few things, which makes me wonder if they have any proofreaders. Why should old videos of an economics professor matter? Here's the gist. Gruber called voters stupid, Republicans are calling him the Obamacare architect, and Democrats are calling it all a big misunderstanding.
Naturally.
Of course. Was Gruber the architect of Obamacare? Not exactly. This is a law that was passed by both houses of Congress and written in different forms by several congressional committees. And might I add that the debates and the vote were held well after midnight Central Time on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting to note that Congress never does votes after midnight on a Sunday. In fact, they would rather be at home on a Sunday and on a weekend. But, you know, what do I know? I'm just a voter whose candidates never win. And he doesn't look nearly as cool, as this guy who actually goes by the name of the architect, or playing a clip from the Matrix movies, blah, blah, blah. All right. So why is he being called that? What did he actually do? All right. He played a crucial role in crafting healthcare law passed in Massachusetts, whatever you call that state, during the then Governor Mitt Romney's tenure.
Right.
And it has to be noted that Obamacare, I mean, all you Republicans are up in arms about this, but it was your guy, Mitt Romney, who actually set the blueprint for it, so, you know.
He paved the way. It was his model.
It was his model, so don't be hypocritical about it. See, we can't be hypocritical because, we don't like either of those parties.
And we weren't invited.
We weren't invited to the prom. We were just left waiting at the door.
I need one of those stickers. Don't blame me. I didn't vote for anybody.
If you didn't vote, you have more of a right to complain, according to George Carlin. And this matters because the 2004 Massachusetts law was the model for Obamacare, which I just said. That's what happens when you try to talk fast. The individual mandate became a key component and political lightning rod of the healthcare law most people now call Obamacare, even though Romney Care could be called also. 2. Gruber was hired in 2009 as a consultant by the Obama administration, paid nearly $400,000 for a year of his work. It would take me 10 years to make $400,000, just throwing that out there. What did he do? Gruber has called it technical support, quote-unquote, and analysis, quote-unquote. What he really did was take a bunch of numbers and model the effects of proposals that would later become the Affordable Care Act. If they hadn't had this kind of an analysis, well, the law would not be designed as well, Gruber said on the O'Reilly Factor last year discussing his work. The law would not have been designed as well. Okay. At least 8 states called him to counsel them on how to implement the health care law and set up state-run health insurance exchanges, and we know how good that's working. Okay.
So architect, well, no, but really important, yeah.
Yeah, he was part of the puzzle. All right, but this guy is still calling voters stupid. I vote. Am I stupid?
Yeah.
Then CNN says, no, you're not stupid. At least we don't think so. But then again...
That's CNN's job. If they said yes...
Yeah, there'd be... I'm sure Ted Turner would have something to say about that, even though I don't think he's control of CNN anymore.
Of course they think you're stupid. They're counting on it.
Hell yeah. So it says here, so why is he calling us voters stupid? Let's first look at what Gruber actually said. He said he was defending the fact that the law was written behind closed doors, and he said that Democrats intentionally made the law confusing to mask the fact that the law instituted a new tax to pay for health reform. Yeah. Why did Democrats do this? Voters don't like new taxes. Gruber said it was more important to get health reform than to be up front.
Yeah, I like his quotes are great. They explain it very well. I mean, he.
Oh yes. That was actually a paraphrase. That wasn't a quote right there.
He has reiterated the same thing in his trying to apologize for his words, but you can't really make that stuff go away, and it's the truth, and he meant what he said. Just maybe he didn't say it in a very politically correct way to say it, but he meant it.
And here are the two quotes I think you're talking about.
Well, I have the transcript of the whole thing.
Oh, you do? Okay. There's quotes from two different speeches he gave.
Yeah.
Quote, it's a very clever, basic explanation of the lack of economic understanding of the American voter, unquote, Gruber said at the honors colloquium, I guess, colloquium 2012 at the University of Rhode Island. He also said, quote, they proposed it and that passed because the American people are too stupid to understand the difference, he said at Washington University at St. Louis in 2013. Well, those people are Cardinal fans down there, so do with that information what you will. The brunt of Gruber's argument is that policymakers crafting the law had to take politics into account. And politics means that politicians prefer to vote for a tax on insurance companies that will ultimately get passed on to consumers rather than voting for a tax on computers outright, for example, although some computers need to be taxed.
It's, just as an aside,
some computers taxing.
Yeah, as an aside, it is the reason why we have a corporate income tax in this country. You pay it. Businesses do not pay taxes. People have to understand.
They pass it all on to you.
Taxes are a cost of doing business. They don't pay it. You do. But if they told you outright that you have to pay this, oh man, people would lose their head.
I saw this thing a few years ago, and I wish I still had the link to it. It was a breakdown of the costs of building a car, and how it gets passed down to you in the final price. And I think they said some 30% of the price of a car are taxes, from all the way down from mining of the ore to make the steel and stuff, all the way to the purchase. 30%.
Yeah.
It might be more than that, it might be less, but it was in that neighborhood. And I just thought that was interesting. You don't see the taxes because they're all hidden. I mean, there was talk years back about doing a value-added tax on stuff here in the U.S. We've pretty much already got it because things are taxed at every basic level of creation, of constructing something, and people don't realize that. But anyway, the brunt of Gruber's argument is that policymakers crafting the law had to take politics into account, and politics means that politicians. Oh, I already read that. And one other thing, he was defending the fact that the law was written behind closed doors, and he said Democrats intentionally made the law confusing to mask the fact that the law instituted a new tax to pay for health reform. Need I remind you that this administration was supposed to be, quote, the most transparent in history, unquote. Right. So, anyway, Gruber's stupid comments are summed up. This is what I'm saying about they need proofreaders at CNN. Gruber's stupid comments are summed up his contention. Instead of are summing up his contention, are summed up, all your base are belong to us, that people don't want to pay more taxes even when they want cheaper or better things. For instance, want better public education? Sure. Want to pay higher taxes to improve public education? This also applies to voting for the individual mandate penalty, as the Obamacare Obama administration refers to it, rather than a tax. as the Supreme Court ruled in 2012. And there's something else there about transparency. They like to hide taxes as quote-unquote user fees.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you pay to the government is a tax. I mean, right out. An entrance fee to a national park, that's a tax.
Yeah. Driver's license, gasoline tax, marriage license, you name it.
All of it's a tax.
Social Security, it's a tax. Use a different word, it's a tax.
Yep. 1984 is here, kids. And it turns out that Gruber always knew a tax on expensive insurance plans would eventually grow to hit almost every insurance plan. He admitted as much in yet another video that surfaced on Friday. The White House and Democrats, by the way, promised up and down that the so-called Cadillac tax wouldn't affect most Americans. But the controversy over whether the mandate is a tax isn't news, right? Nope, but it is giving Republicans' claims that the Obama administration misled voters on the truth of the Affordable Care Act more credence. So why are Democrats trying to distance themselves from Gruber? Democrats clearly don't want Obamacare tarnished any more than it already has because of one guy. And they definitely don't want him to be the face of Obamacare or Democrats' view on the law. What they're trying to do is downplay Gruber's role in crafting the law. Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, and this is the part of the story I love the most.
Oh, she's just a comedy of errors, man.
Without Nancy Pelosi, I don't think there would be any humor in politics currently. Well, there wouldn't be as good humor in politics. And speaking of good humor, I could use some ice cream. But Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi said Gruber didn't help write our bill and claimed not to know who he is.
Right.
He wasn't being entirely upfront on that point. Gee, you think? Pelosi actually cited Gruber's work approvingly in 2009 and even mentioned him by name in an interview that same year.
Cited his work. She knows very well who he is. Of course, she's the same one that was complaining about was it 500 million people a month lose their job? Remember that one? She mentioned it twice.
Oh, wait, you said 500. When was this? I missed this.
She was complaining about W, of course, complaining about how he was causing jobs losses, and for every month that we don't have this reform, I forget what it was, 500 million people are losing their jobs.
Even if you counted the people that came to the United States illegally.
I understand, okay, you misspeak, oops, and that's what they, shrugged it off as. And 3 days later, she did it again.
I'm thinking somebody wrote the number, her speechwriter wrote the number down incorrectly, and she just read it correctly.
Probably.
Which means that she didn't proofread the damn thing.
Yeah, or doesn't think about it at all. She just hired, a 21-year-old poli-sci graduate. Here, write me a speech, and then that's how that goes. So.
People always trashed on Dan Quayle for not being like the most intelligent person in the world, but we're pretty silent about Nancy Pelosi, I've found. That's just kind of interesting, I thought. But
great.
Anyway. There's only a little bit more here. Was Gruber making a larger point here that we're missing? Definitely. If you can get past his condescending tone and insults, Gruber's speeches actually offer some insight into how policy is impacted by politics.
Yeah.
You had a law which said healthy people are going to pay in. If you made it explicit that healthy people pay in and sick people get money, it would not have passed, okay? Gruber said. And while the impartial, in parentheses, jury on the Affordable Care Act is still out, the law has lowered the national uninsured rate, and so far the law is proving to be cheaper than expected. Gosh, man, I'm coming down with something.
Here's the thing. I mean, remember now, this is an MIT economist. Okay, so he's supposed to be a brain. Of course, his speeches, man, I speak better than he does. But anyway, he said, I'm paraphrasing, but later on in the one particular speech they're talking about, this discussion with Mark Pauley, he said that Senator Chuck Schumer doesn't understand economics, and he called one of Senator Olympia Snow's staffers an idiot. So if this guy recognizes, and that's just a couple of names that he had brought up, if this guy recognizes that, it comes to what you're just saying there, Jim. People don't understand how this legislation is drafted. If you think your legislators wrote this thing, that they, over the span of a couple of weeks, wrote 2,000 pages of legislation, come on.
And this is something we really need to have somebody in from this organization, and they used to be called Downsize DC, but I think they're Consent Chronicle now. They have several pieces of legislation out there that they want to get introduced, and I think a couple of them did. They have the Write the Bills Act, the Read the Bills Act. The Write the Bills Act basically states, if I might be misrepresenting it, that the bill is the bill. No amendments for stuff on there that can trap opponents into looking like they kick puppies because they want to vote against a congressional pay raise. And the Read the Bills Act makes it mandatory that every freaking word of every bill is read in front of a quorum of Congress, and if it's not, that bill cannot get passed.
Yeah, you can't pass it on the title.
Let's put it this way. The novel Atlas Shrugged, which I've tried reading but is horribly, horribly hard to read, is about 1,000 pages long. But it's fiction and it is kind of readable. I haven't really gotten I really don't know how long that is on audiobook, but I'm going to assume possibly 15 hours on audiobook.
Yeah. And designed to be at least somewhat entertaining, unlike a healthcare bill, which is not.
Yes, and the healthcare bill is over 2,000 pages. I believe it's over 2,000. If not, it's right around 2,000 pages. And if we go with 15 hours to read a 1,000-page book, then we're talking 30 hours of Congress to read this freaking bill.
But remember, you're not done there, because there's so many pieces of modern legislation that just point to other places in the law. The bill says, we change the word "and" to "or" in this other part of the United States Code. Now you have to go look that up. It doesn't really say what it means.
And it takes 3 paragraphs to do that. It takes. Hey, Lec.
I've been on for quite a few minutes, but you all seemed like you were doing really well, so I didn't want to break your momentum.
I had the article right up there in front of my face, so I wasn't really monitoring the.
Well, he's been here a while. He looked like he was letting us rant.
Yeah.
I'm almost done with this article. I just want to read this.
Go ahead, guy. I have to say when it's over.
Last 2 paragraphs are only 1 sentence each. Either way, Gruber has said he believes the U.S. is better off with Obamacare than without it. And the last paragraph, and if less transparency helps implement better policy, he's okay with that.
Well, obviously, like you said many times on the show before, Obama has not lived up to his promise,
thankfully,
to have the most transparent administration in history. But you mentioned the Read the Bills Act. I've heard of that before. I don't know how much good it would do. Hopefully, at the very least, it would make the public aware of, what's in some of these bills. I know Harry Brown, when he ran for president, of course, he was, for those of you who don't know, he was the LP nominee back in '96 and then again in 2000, making himself so far the only 2-time LP nominee. But he said he would automatically veto any bill that was too long.
I need to correct something. The organization's newsletter is called Consent Chronicle. They're still downsized org, and if I might just go on here, a real quick summary of the Write the Laws Act. You lend your car to a friend, and the friend loans it to someone else. Are you okay with that? Congress does something similar. The people gave Congress the power to write our laws. Congress has loaned that power to unelected bureaucrats. Each year, bureaucrats issue tens of thousands of new dictates. None of these rules are written by Congress, read by Congress, debated by Congress, or voted on by Congress. Are you okay with that? We grant judges and juries the power to decide guilt and render punishments, but Congress has loaned bureaucrats this power too. Groups of unelected bureaucrats serve the combined role of legislators, police, judges, juries, and punishers. Are you okay with that? Congress claims it needs experts to write the rules. We agree that Congress lacks expertise. Truer than they even know. But this is no excuse for delegating its responsibilities. Congress can hire whatever expertise it lacks, but it still has an obligation to write the rules, read the rules, debate the rules, and vote the rules into law. Congress fails to write all the rules we must obey for the same reason it fails to read any of the laws it passes. If Congress actually had to do its job, there's no way it could make government grow so fast. Congress shouldn't spend so much money, reward so many friends, punish so many enemies, and control so much of your life. That's why DownsizeDC.org has written the Write the Laws Act as a companion bill to its Read the Bills Act. The WTLA requires that Congress write specific legislation with no details left to bureaucrats. All allegations of wrongdoing be tried in judicial branch courts, not by bureaucrats. All punishments be rendered by judges, not bureaucrats. executive branch agencies be limited into investigation and prosecution, citizens be held blameless against any government actions that violate these rules, and previous legislation granting legislative and judicial power to bureaucrats be identified so it can be repealed. I totally forgot. They've got several different things that several different pieces of acts that they have that they want to get introduced. They have the Write the Bills Act, like I just said there, the Read the Bills Act, which requires every bill to be read in front of Congress, and the one I was confusing it with was the One Subject at a Time Act, which basically says that, if you're writing legislation for X, legislation is only for X. You can't amend stuff for Y and Z onto it. So they got a whole slew of things here which are interesting, but I just wanted to clear that up. So you can continue on there.
Yeah, I think those are great ideas, and it's certainly one of the biggest problems we have now in America is all the things that have been unconstitutionally delegated to bureaucrats. Who are often very arrogant and really just well, it's like I think one problem that we have now, and this is why we have so many thugs from the government. When you go back a couple of generations ago, when the size and scope of government was nowhere near what it is now, government was not, as government work was not as appealing to thugs. And the bigger and the more intrusive the government gets, the more attractive it becomes to the wrong kind of people. And so that's just one of the many reasons why we have to scale back government. 20 years ago, when I first became a libertarian, I thought having a libertarian government was merely a good idea. Now I think it's an absolute necessity, which is why I felt a lot more urgency these last few years. And as for what Eric said about bills, about you can't judge a bill by its name. I mean, there's so many examples of that. I think that's one of the biggest problems that most people have. What we call information voter. They assume that a bill does what its name is. Like my favorite example these days is the Violence Against Women Act. That if you vote against it, that that you support violence against women. And I always remind people when condemning the act, in case they aren't familiar, in all 50 states, violence against women is already a crime.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying, what you guys are saying there about the title of the bills having nothing to do with the actual bills itself. I find it interesting when people refer to the Patriot Act. Its actual name is the USA Patriot Act, and that is a damn acronym. The whole thing is an acronym.
The whole thing it's a big initialism. Yeah, exactly.
And I remember Ron Paul. I heard them say, I listened to just about every speech Ron Paul gave because I subscribed to. There was a Ron Paul podcast back in 2012. I listened to almost every speech he ever gave, especially those on college campuses, and he told the story so many times that it was just that the Patriot Act had been around for years, and right after 9/11, that became the excuse to push it through. Now, again, I know that none of us are conspiracy theorists. I don't think the government, orchestrated 9/11 by any means. I don't think that at all. But I think they use tragedies like 9/11 as an excuse to grow. And I don't think
wasn't it Hillary Clinton? I believe it was. It was some Democrat that said never let a tragedy go to waste or something like that.
I don't recall that. That is the mentality of them. And you see, I don't think there's any conspiracy. I just think that government, like we all are out for our own self-interests. And which in itself is fine. The problem is when you're, in the course of pursuing your self-interests, you harm other people, which is, what the government so often does. And, government wants to grow. It has every incentive to grow, and it will only get smaller if the people absolutely force it to. I mean, let me give you an example. And I'll try to get too off topic here, but someone recently made a point that even though 58% of Americans now support marijuana legalization, only one U.S. senator does. It's a Democrat from Oregon. I don't remember his name. And Rand Paul, he has not come out in favor of legalization, though he has come out in favor of getting the federal government out of drug prohibition. But the point is, somebody asked on a Facebook group that I'm in, why is it that only one senator out of 100 supports marijuana legalization, and the answer is that these people, these senators, they might be, thick-headed, and dense, but I mean, they're not morons. They understand that, marijuana, that there's no reason to keep marijuana illegal, but it's just that they're owned by all these special interests, like the pharmaceutical companies, and so, but I pointed out, well, that's true. If these senators were so afraid that they were going to get voted out of office if they kept on, financing this ridiculous war on drugs, that they would, they'd get with the program. So I think the thing is, incentives matter. People have to, get active and make these politicians fear for their jobs if they don't, get it together.
Yeah. Well, it's this the healthcare law. Even and Gruber pointed to some things. If you write this the way it really means, it's not going to happen. You have to do it in a politically acceptable way.
Yeah.
So as long as the Congress can continue to fund and fight the war on drugs without repercussion, then they will.
I mean, you're saying if you're saying that Gruber said that if you write this the way that it the way that it really is, it won't get passed. It's 1984. It's newspeak. They got to use weasel words. They got to make things change. Change the way they mean. We got to go through the ministry of love, and I love Big Brother and all that.
Let me read his quotes. If you hear the quotes from
Go for it.
The thing he did. It was a economics discussion, a conference with Mark Pauly, who, for lack of, it's a lot more detailed, but he's the against and Gruber is the for. So, but it's a lot more complex than that. Anyhow, Gruber was commenting on things that are wrong with it and the way it should have been and that sort of stuff. So, or Pauly wasn't, and Gruber responded to it. You can't do it politically. You just literally cannot do it. Transparent financing, unless, I think he meant if, I have transparent financing, I also have transparent spending. And they don't want that. They want to hide that. This is a direct quote. This bill was written in a tortured way to make sure the CBO, that's the Congressional Budget Office, did not score the mandate as taxes. If CBO scored the mandate as taxes, the bill dies. So it's written to do that. All this stuff. In terms of risk-related subsidies, if you had a law which said healthy people are going to pay in, you made it explicit that healthy people pay in and sick people get money, it would not have passed. Lack of transparency is a huge political advantage. Basically, call it the stupidity of the American voter or whatever, but basically that was really critical to get the thing to pass. I wish Mark was right and we could make it all transparent, but I'd rather have this law than not. So the ends justify the means. It's perfectly fine to lie to the American public, Al Gore, and you have to hide the true cost from the public.
It really, and the thing that really pisses me off on this whole thing so much is the fact that the what was I going to say? That they basically they while he said it, Congress didn't say. Congress can't say that the American public is stupid. They can only treat us like that. Yeah. But that guy, since he's not a part of the government, he can go right out and say it. And at least I have to admire the guy's honesty, because he's like right out there, right out front, basically calling us stupid. I mean, he's saying what he's on his mind. He's saying what he believes, and you got to admire that. The average politician, not so much.
Yeah, and I think that the thing is, there's a bumper sticker that says, if the people will lead, leaders will follow, which is so true. Now, I don't know the ideology of the person who came up with that bumper sticker, but it doesn't matter because it's a true statement. And yet, just the other day, I saw this guy who had a couple of, anti-corporate bumper stickers on his car right next to an Obama bumper sticker. And which would be hilarious if it weren't so sad that Obama is one of the biggest corporate presidents we've ever had, with the bailouts and everything. And it's amazing how many people, because he has a D next to his name, don't recognize him for what he is.
Yeah, and I love the bumper sticker. It says Obama, and it's got the peace sign in his O, and the O. He's killed more people with cruise missiles than any other Nobel Peace Prize winner in history. So,
and it's like
that out there.
And it's like, when we had Will Coley on here, for Muslims for Liberty, I joked with Will that, why when people ask me if I believe that Obama's a Muslim, I say based on the number of Muslims he's killed, my educated guess is no. and Will got a big laugh at that as well. So yeah, it's amazing, just how people are blinded by, by partisan politics, this false left-right dichotomy.
I use my Apple products, the most valuable company in the history of companies, to complain about corporatism.
There was exactly. There was a photo taken from one of the Occupy protests a while back, and they're holding up signs that were like anti-corporate and that. And some guy pointed out that took the picture and circled every Apple iPhone and iPad that they were using.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
It's just the ignorance is really, especially when it comes from people who are very well educated, and then who get so absorbed with all these, what I call pseudo issues like same-sex marriage, And of course, as we as libertarians, we believe in equal rights for gays, but a lot of us are starting to come around, first of all, to the belief that I've had for 10 years now, which is that government shouldn't be defining or sanctioning marriages. And if it should, we should certainly allow gays the same rights that we allow everyone else. I'm far more concerned about eroding civil liberties and our $17 trillion national debt and our state of perpetual war. And I think that the Democrats and Republicans love distracting us with issues like same-sex marriage, so we won't notice what a mess they're making of the country.
And you bring up pseudo issues, which is actually a good segue into something else I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
There's just been over the last several years, and I have to admit this is a topic that I'm not 100% well versed on, but it's basically come to a head this week. It's the whole issue of net neutrality. It sounds good that certain data and certain speech on the internet should be treated the same as everything else, but there's really more into it than that. I was reading an article the other day that basically says that this whole thing right now stems from a claim, a lawsuit or something by Netflix, stating that they don't want to have to pay extra for extra bandwidth. And they're using this whole thing to make it to where they can get extra bandwidth without having to pay for it.
Well, people see that's a backwards argument. People don't understand what this thing means, and the assumption by many people, they think it's telling the government that you're not allowed to censor it. That's not what it's about. It's all about bandwidth and services. It has nothing to do with yet censorship.
And I was reading, somebody made a good point on there. That if we allow the government to regulate the internet, or regulate who gets what kind of bandwidth or whatever, that's just opening a can of worms. That's the camel's nose under the tent argument here. That then they're going to go ahead and argue what you can and can't put on the internet. It's already being done in other countries. In fact, there was a very hilarious thing where what was it? I think it was Virgin in Great Britain has this every ISP in Great Britain is forced to have an adult content filter on it, and we know how well those things work. If you're doing research on say the Holocaust, these filters have been notorious for blocking sites that talk about it. And I'm not talking about the Holocaust denial ones either. I'm talking about genuine scholarly type sites. But in the last couple of weeks, Virgin had their filter up, and oops, it accidentally blocked every website on the internet, including their own.
Wow. I hadn't heard that one. That's a good one.
Yeah,
I can talk about this if you want.
Yes, please. I do want to quickly mention one thing here. I heard that on, I believe it was Tech News Today, which is a podcast on the Twit network. They have a lot of good information on there, and they also tackle a lot of issues about government intruding into the internet and stuff. So, not totally unbiased. They support net neutrality, but if you want to get some of the goofier stuff that the government's doing with the internet, listen to that show.
Yeah, well, they're a little misguided, and that's part of the problem. Is what's happening is the name is a little misleading, and what people think it's about. It's a lot of the arguments for it are very misguided. If it were left alone to only this one issue, and if it were a law passed written well, which they could do with a couple of sentences, not 2,000 pages and a year-long congressional research service study and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and funded by AT&T and so on, then it would work because it sounds good. The idea is that internet service providers have to treat all traffic equally. They cannot discriminate or change or manipulate the content in any way based on the source or the destination. So the fear is that you want to watch your HBO on demand on the internet. Well, AT&T is in that business. So what they do is they monitor the traffic. They want you to subscribe to Uverse TV. So when you try to watch your HBO direct from HBO, they throttle your speed down. So the performance goes to hell. You want good TV, you have to buy ours. You can't buy theirs. And that's the fear, that Amazon will get hit, that Netflix will get hit. Google, who's going to provide their own internet service, they'll be able to ramp it up for their services and slow it down for everybody else and that sort of thing. So the idea is let's get a law in there that makes it illegal to do that.
And I wanted to just quickly here that brings up a couple of things here. First of all, last time I heard where everything needs to be treated equally, the first thing that comes to my mind is let's say Soviet Union, or everybody was treated equally. 1984, where everybody was treated equally, and then on top of it, when it says that they can't discriminate against different types of network traffic. What about government network traffic? You can't have a classless society because the people ruling the classless society are their own class. There's a story about in the Soviet Union they had this department store in downtown Moscow, which had a secret floor for members of the party who were in the government, and you could buy stuff like cars from the West and everything. They're the stuff that the average person couldn't get. I mean, where's the equality there? And if government gets involved in this, there's not going to be any equality.
Yeah, the East German Trabant is a great example of all that sort of stuff. When you want equality in society, we're going to give everyone a car, but so that no one has an advantage, since you don't really need the fancy red sports car. Everyone gets the same car. You get a total piece of junk.
Total equality. It doesn't lift anyone up. It actually brings everyone down.
Well, that's the argument against net neutrality. While it sounds like a good idea that you can't let these companies unfairly target what you want to use the internet for, it doesn't stop there. If it was written just perfectly, and we know government never does that, and the other fear is, as soon as you open the door to regulation, government marches right through with a team of attorneys and botches the whole thing up, and you get thousands of pages of legislation.
Well, Harry Brown said to never give government an inch unless you're prepared to give them a mile. And one of the things that you're talking about, equality. Well, it reminds me of when I first inquired about the LP. And Jim knows that. I don't know if you know, Eric. I first discovered the LP 22 years ago at the age of 21, back at when I saw Andre Maroon, that year's LP presidential nominee on C-SPAN, and I ended up gravitating toward libertarian over a process that took about 2 years to complete. But that definitely set me on the path. And so, of course, that was before the internet, so I sent in for this. I actually wrote in the by postal mail for information to the screen, and there was an article in there by a guy named Richard Body. He's a black guy who's run for office several times. He's run for U.S. Senate and some other offices, and he's his mid-late 70s now. And the article is titled "Give Me Liberty, Not Equality," and his point is that equality can only be achieved by force. And you know, so and that I never thought of it that way before. And of course, now I can't emphasize more strongly that we, as libertarians, we believe in equal rights, but we do not in any way believe that it's the government's place to, you know, guarantee equality of outcome. You know, I mean, if
it's one of the one of the gosh. The people who I think in history in the entertainment industry have really skewered government better than anyone else has always been Monty Python. There was a great bit they had. It was a takeoff on the Robin Hood mythos. It was Dennis Moore, and he was going to rich people and stealing their lupins, the flowers, and then eventually it got to where they got pissed that the poor people he was giving these flowers to just were sick of it. And so the poor people told him, why don't you go steal stuff we can use, like money and gold and all of this, and went out to do it. Yeah. And so he was stealing from the rich all of this gold and silverware and whatever, and jewelry. Then he gave it to the poor people. And then he was doing it so much that the poor people suddenly became rich.
Right.
And he was like, all I got left were these spoons. And the poor woman, who's now rich, says, I won't have it in my house, and throws it away. And at the end of the episode, he stops this carriage with a bunch of rich people, and he's like, stand and deliver, present your valuables. Okay, you've got more than him, and so I'm going to take some of these and give it to that person. And wait, are you hiding something in your coat? How can we do this if you're going to hide something? And I mean, it's totally the way this is. I mean, it works the same way with data. You're by treating everything equal, you're not going to treat everything equal. Or, as my broadcasting professor pointed out, if you treat everyone as special, then nobody's special.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. A few proponents of this plan, they argue that service providers don't have any such plans, that they don't intend on doing this. They're all going to play nice, and this idea is not going to be, it's not going to happen. So, but there's evidence to the contrary already. Comcast has already been identified as intentionally reducing user speeds on peer-to-peer networks, and they got in trouble for that. So the evidence is already there that they will do this, at least in some capacity, if you let them do it. So therefore, we have to have net neutrality. The problem is unintended consequences, and that's the reason why Cato Institute and American Enterprise Institute and and Linksys and Cisco and all these
are all right-wing organizations.
Oh, the protocol designers, the people that actually invented the internet and make the traffic flow across it, they all favor a hands-off approach because they know the unintended consequences are going to be devastating, and it's much better off to not open that door for government.
You know what the solution to the whole issue is? And Wired Magazine pointed this out, and I've seen many other people point this out, and it makes absolute sense. End the monopoly of the cable companies.
Well, that's one of the other arguments that that people have, that we don't need this because increased competition will help sort this out, and it would help to sort this out. Where I live, I can only choose between 2 internet service providers. If one of those 2 does something I don't like, I can go to the other one. What happens when both of them do it? And they're both mega billion-dollar operations. They both do this. I'm stuck. There's no way around that.
It's almost as bad as a monopoly, if not worse in some cases.
There's no way around that. And even if I were to try to find some other company, a third party, they have to lease the circuits from these 2 because they're not allowed to wire it. You wonder why the Google Fiber and even the AT&T mega service, whatever they're calling it, that they're rolling out, why are they in only a handful of cities? And those 2, they're in the same cities. Why? Because those cities have worked toward doing this. Municipalities in states and counties need to work toward that. Where I live, unless you pay the outrageous franchise fees, you can't provide this service. And that's why I get to choose between 2 mega billion-dollar operations, as that's all who can afford to be here.
That's the ones that the fact that you only have those 2 to choose from isn't entirely true. However, that having been said, the only competition they have, I've seen out here something called Skylink, I think it is, and then there's another one out here.
I could get satellite.
The problem is that those services are nowhere near as good as the services that the other companies offer, and in many cases they're much more expensive and require horribly expensive equipment to get.
And that's just it. There's some third parties
But it's not competition.
Yeah, well, there's some third parties I could rent some stuff from, but they have to rent the circuits, and so the prices go up dramatically. And because
they're renting the circuits from, once again.
Yeah, and then because they're renting that circuit, they have to abide by the rules of that circuit. So if AT&T decides to, do this discrimination, I still have it. You can't work around that.
Right. The problem is that through crony capitalism and through Congress, we've let companies like AT&T and Verizon and Comcast get way too big. Comcast is in the process of trying to purchase Time Warner Cable, and if that happens, if they're allowed to do that, I mean, what then? I mean, they're going to be even more screwed.
I don't have a problem with that. I mean, if you support a free economy, and I'm a pure capitalist, that's fine. Get as big as you want. The problem is when you have government on your side preventing anybody else from coming in. If I wanted to start a cable internet company, I can't do it. I'm not allowed to rent a utility pole and provide internet service to my next door neighbor. It's against the law.
Yeah,
Now,
or if you don't deliver letters,
Yeah,
that's another thing.
If you want to get in the first-class mail business, you can't. It is against the law.
And Eric, you were talking about, I'm with you. I'm for unrestricted capitalism. Well, but one thing that's tragic is how many people don't understand what capitalism is. I mean, about 99% of the time when I talk about how we need capitalism, and I hear somebody disagree with me, they don't know what capitalism is. They confuse corporatism with capitalism. And I always point out, you mentioned, government being on your side. If the government is on your side, then it's not capitalism.
Yeah.
If the government is bailing you out and not, your competitor, it's not capitalism.
Right.
I believe Ronald Reagan said, if somebody says, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help," you should be scared.
Yeah. Look, there's a few other things that are unintended consequences.
Yeah.
Let's say we pass this law, and the law says that internet service providers cannot filter their traffic and they can't throttle speeds. If it's that generic and it won't let them do it at all, here's what breaks down. Throttling speeds can be a very useful component to guaranteeing quality of service. And shame on Leo Laporte over at Twit TV if he supports net neutrality, because he's one of the guys who complains about how poor the quality of people's network connections are, about how much, the buffering and latency, it's just terrible. Throttling speeds can be valuable. What happens when you're watching a streaming video and, your kids are chatting away on Facebook Messenger or something, and every time someone sends a picture over the messenger, your movie stops. If you can monitor the traffic and prioritize it, the service provider can give you a better quality of service for the given speed by slowing down the things that are less important than the things that you want to have priority. So there's something that breaks. You might say, well, I don't really care about that. Well, the service provider might. If they want you to be able to be happy with 3 megabit service because you don't want to pay for 6, they can give you better service. It could impede service providers from filtering content based on what it is, things that are legally required or useful. They wouldn't be able to filter spam because the law says you can't filter anything. So you can't filter spam. You can't filter for denial of service attacks. Government, says you can't allow this kind of traffic. Can't do that. Suppose that they want to decide a service provider wants to block pornography or block all traffic from Russia. Can't do it. Law won't let you. Verizon argues that net neutrality would be forced anti-discrimination and then violate their constitutional rights. It's their private property. That circuit is their private property. They should be allowed to, within some kind of limit, maybe, as long as it's not censorship, unnecessary censorship, they should be allowed what kind of traffic goes across it. It's their property. The law would prevent them from being able to do that. Suppose Verizon wants to block Skype or Google Hangouts. It might be sleazy, but it's their private property. Shouldn't they be allowed to do that? If Verizon and Google want you to buy their services, Verizon wants you to buy their telephone instead of you using Skype,
You know, there was a recent brouhaha with T-Mobile because they were saying that any traffic which is streaming like music, you know, to their phones and tablets and whatnot, they weren't going to count that against your bandwidth. And the pro net neutrality people were all up in arms about that. Oh, holy cow! We're at the 5-minute mark. I got to change this audio. That's annoying.
That's loud. Yeah, I mean, I don't like what some of the propositions are, but I mean, and you know, I feel bad for someone like a Netflix, but I understand that if Netflix is making money using a circuit provided by AT&T, I can picture where AT&T says, you know what, you got to pay us for that because you're using X percentage of our bandwidth. You know, but the argument is, yeah, but the customer's paying for that already, and that's what they want it for. So I understand where some of these arguments come from, but when you use the power of government to say what you can and can't do, I have a problem with that. One of the propositions is that the FCC is going to maybe permit service providers to charge fees for better service or faster service.
Which I think is fine.
It might be, yeah. They've previously said they would not do that, and they stood behind leaving it open, but this past spring they've considered a rule that would allow that. Keep in mind, whatever happens with this, government's going to get it wrong. I guarantee you they're going to get it wrong, which is why I don't support it. Look, they're talking about amending, hold on, the Communications Act of 1934. This is what you need to understand about government and how they do things. Yeah, it's been amended a bunch of times and so on, but look, they're so far behind in the technology, they haven't the slightest idea what they're doing. Not even close.
and one thing, I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't know. I thought you were doing
we got to wrap this up here. I just wanted to chime in one last thing here. I feel sympathetic for Netflix because they want to give consumers a lower price option to have good content. But they're getting screwed over by the movie industry because they won't let them have new movies because the big entertainment moguls and monopolies won't let them or think that Netflix is charging way too little, and so Netflix is using the net neutrality debate to try to find a way to charge their customers less. I mean, I kind of feel for Netflix. Don't support them, but I feel for them. Anyway, you were going to say, Lec?
Yeah, I just want to say. I saw the other day, this, and hopefully this is a good closing thought, the most ridiculous cartoon, and I, responded to it. This guy posted it. It's a lot. He's obviously a sore loser after his beloved Democrats got wiped out in the elections last week. Not that I'm any big Republican fan, obviously, but anyway, it shows a bunch of people at a campaign, and on the bottom it says the American people have spoken. And here are what the signs and quotes coming from the audience. We want dirtier air and water so CEOs can make more money. Yes to costly health care. Please tap our computer messages. Send our jobs overseas. Limit our internet freedom. Stop giving us benefits from our tax money. Pave our farmlands. Give our forests to the timber companies now. No laws for industry. Don't tell us what's in our food. And finally, give us E. coli burgers. And I responded. I think I responded to every one of those ridiculous claims, and I point out that the only protection consumers need against E. coli burgers is the free market, because I mean, you don't need laws.
As I've said before on that particular issue, go through the news and see how many places have been closed down due to food poisoning that were inspected by the government, and then search for news stories. Where and then search for news stories where people have gotten sick at backyard barbecues, at church basements, and lemonade stands. Things that are not inspected by the government.
Almost never.
You're gonna see a huge disparity there. But with that, we got to let you go. Once again, thanks to my cohorts Eric and Lec for joining in here. And as per always, if you want to hear archives of our show, tsplive.com. You can get our back episodes and that there. And by the way, I just realized that we were not broadcasting over Radio Fubar because I'm getting a password error and I didn't notice this, so I got to see if something's wrong at work last week. We're also in iTunes, and please go to iTunes and rate us. Give us a good review. 5-star would be nice, but any review would be good at this point. Normally, you can tune us in at radiofubar.com every Saturday, 9 a.m. Central for the live show, or if you're a member of Google+, you can add the Side Project Live to your circles, and you'll get an update when you can watch us. We're on the TuneIn Radio app on your smartphone, tablet, or Roku box. All you got to do is search for Radio Fubar. Also, if you search for tuiville.com, we rebroadcast there every just afternoon on Sundays at tuiville.com, and I just noticed another typo on this the stuff that I'm reading. We're also on Stitcher on your smartphone. Subscribe to us there, and if you'd like to support the show, go to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/tsplive, and you can make a low per episode donation. I really need to work on getting that up and going a little bit better than I have. We also have T-shirts in the Radio Fubar store. That's http://radiofubar.bigcartel.com. And once again, from Side Project Tower, Morris, Illinois, this is Jim Goebel.
Hey, from Lockport, Illinois, Eric Ferguson.
And from Indianapolis, Lex Zorn.
And next week we are going to have Terry Knoll back on the show to talk more about Bitcoin, because we feel our last conversation wasn't fully developed. So we'll see you then, and peace out.
See ya.